The speech that I'm giving today is part of an advanced manual called Storytelling, and the name of this particular topic is Let's Get Personal, and you just use personal experience to tell a story, and I think that's pretty much the point of the speech. And I'm hoping that this speech will help me develop my storytelling abilities so that I can construct the different elements of the speech more coherently, or the story more coherently, and so here we go. So today's speech is about business etiquette, which comes off as a pretty boring topic. Business etiquette is when you go to a meeting or when you go to a business dinner or a lunch, you have to do things a certain way. There's a certain formality about it. There are all these different rules about the way that you're supposed to cut your food and all the way that everything's arranged around your plate. And it's super complicated, and a lot of people wonder, what is the point of all that? And this story is kind of a personal story about that. So there's a little bit of background about me. I grew up pretty much poor. I was born in a one-bedroom apartment, which is kind of ironic because my grandparents were nobility, but then the communists came and tore everything down, so then my family had no money. So all throughout childhood, I was just this poor kid, and we were just scraping by. My parents were just scraping by money to make sure that we were well fed, and we did eat well, but there were a lot of luxuries we couldn't have because we didn't have the money. So then, by the time I was in middle school, my parents were working really hard, and they got to the point where they were middle class. So they had a lot more money to do luxury stuff, and so we decided to take a trip back to Florida, where I'd spent a couple years earlier in my childhood, and we decided to go to Disney World and just go to all these resorts, go to the beaches, take a cruise, and it was a pretty good experience. I got to go in there and have fun, but this cruise ship, very interesting thing happened on this cruise ship. So the thing about cruise ships is that you have your first class, right? People who are really, really rich, and they just go there and they have these giant rooms that are the size of this room, and they have all these extra amenities that nobody else has. And then you have sort of like on the Titanic, you have the second and third floor, or second or third class, where it's just not actually as good. So there are two types of people on cruise ships, and there's a bit of an interchange between all these people. What happened was, when I got on this cruise ship, there were a lot of people. We were going through the safety drill. So there was a whole row of seats, about as long as this room, on one side of the boat, another row of seats here, and then there was this instructor who came by to tell everybody, here's how you put on your life jacket. Everyone on the boat, including all the rich people, were required to come out, sit here, and learn how to, not be a Titanic type of thing. Like if the boat were to sink, this is what you're supposed to do. So while I was sitting out there, I look across all the way down this row of seats, right? And there's this girl, like just she seemed like one of those. Well, she seemed like she was adopted. I felt like this was a fair guess because she was Chinese and both her parents were white. It seemed like her parents were really rich, all dressed in like classy clothes, all the way on the other side of the boat. And I looked across the boat at this girl, and I puked. I don't know if it was because the boat was just, the way the boat was just churning, I had motion sickness. It was like my stomach was turning, and while I was puking, I looked across this boat at this girl, and I could tell there was something there. Not something good, but something was going on there. So then I had to go back to my hotel room, or my cabin room, and kind of try to get reaccustomed to not having motion sickness. I had to try to get over that, sleep it off, do something. My parents were too cheap to get me Benadryl or anything, so I was just trying to sleep it off. My mom comes, a couple hours later, my mom comes down to the room and she says, look, we're gonna go out and eat. We're gonna go eat food, is gonna make you better, which is actually true. You think that's not the case, but food actually does help you out when you're feeling really nauseous. So I go out to this big room, like one of those ballrooms where you sit down at these tables and you have to eat. And the way they've set it up is really weird. You have actually multiple families just sitting together at these tables. And so I sit down, and the other family there is this girl. And I'm like, this is gonna work out. You know, I got a shot. It's gonna work out. So we're sitting down to eat, and they put down the plates, and there's actually more forks than I've seen on a table in my entire life. At that point, it was the first 3-course meal I'd ever even seen. So I look down, and I don't even know what is going on with what. I'd never gone to any etiquette classes, so I didn't know really how to eat. And this girl, she picks up like her fork, and she's just like so pro at cutting, you know? She's just sitting there cutting her food, and I'm like, how are you knowing just how to just work with the orchestra of different components in front of you? I didn't understand. And parents, as parents are wont to do, my parents were telling stories about me to this girl's parents while we were all sitting together at this table. They're basically eating like cavemen. They're just like not even caring about how the food's getting in their mouths. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just like trying to ignore them, but like trying to prove that I can use. And so this was kind of a crash course in etiquette. I was trying to just eat the same way that she was, and it wasn't working out. You know, I kept dropping my food. I would try to cut little pieces of food and raise to my mouth, and then it would just fall back on the plate. And then it was sometimes it would fall next to the plate, and so I just had this whole hodgepodge of nastiness in front of me. I was utterly failing at this. But this girl, she's actually smiling at me. I can't tell if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but she's sitting there smiling and eating. And I don't know, I couldn't get over the fact of how classy she was, you know? I don't know, like, as a 14-year-old, just seeing somebody who, you know, your worlds are really contained, and seeing somebody outside of your world that just knows so much more than you do, even though they're the same age. It's like she's part of this secret world that I couldn't be a part of. And I was trying so hard to get into that world, get into the space of this. I want to be classy too, you know. And towards the end of the dinner, I feel like I've been doing a pretty good job, despite the fact that everything's falling all over the place. I turned to this girl, and I was like, hey, let's hang out. And she turns to me, and she's like, no. So that's basically how the whole situation ended. But the lesson from there, from that experience, from that point all the way until now, was that every single time I hear people talking about how much business etiquette is just nonsense, I think about that experience, and I think about how I don't ever want to be in that situation again, where I don't even know what I'm doing with myself, and it seems like everybody in the room knows more than I do. And this is a relatively lighthearted story. I'm not scarred for life or anything, but the important thing to take from this, I think, is that a lot of these social conventions exist not because they make any sense, but because without knowing these secret things to do, you can't be part of this world, and you can't get classy women to get with you. So, no matter how good you are at everything else. So, from this point forth, it's been kind of a Gatsby type experience where I'm reclaiming all this that I lost when I was a kid, just trying to get to the point where I can exist in the business world and be able to interact with people. So, there you go.